So good afternoon, everyone. I believe you can see us and hear us clearly. Thank you for attending this webinar offered by the European School Education Platform, the European Commission's platform for school education in Europe. My name is Maria Elena, and I will be the hostess of this session. This is a recorded webinar, and the recording has already started. Let me inform you that all the material will be uploaded on the webinar's website on the European School Education Platform in the following days. Before we begin, I would like to remind you of some important technicalities. Following the General Data Protection Regulations, your microphones and your cameras have been disabled. However, we invite you to share any thoughts or questions through the chat. Also, we kindly ask you to not share any personal information during this session. Instead, you're always very welcome to use the Connect tab on the European School Education Platform for partner finding and collaboration. Please give me some thumbs up if you can hear me and see me clearly. Great, thank you. Thank you for your input. Thank you so much. So maybe now it's time to introduce you to a very useful tool that you can use in case of any language difficulties. It's the caption tools. To activate the subtitles live captions for this event, as you can see on your screens, please click the button More at the bar on the top of your screen. Then you can move to Language and Speech and click Live Captions. You can also install this function by going to, again, the button More, then click on Settings and turn on the captions in the Accessibility section. So if you have any questions about this, please let us know in the chat, and me and my colleague Marta will be happy to help you with this. So, with no further delays, today we have the honor of welcoming Mary Masterson. Mary, as you can see, is an associate professor and a teacher educator at the School of Education at the University of Limerick in Ireland, and she holds a strong expertise in the area of literacy and development. Together with Mary today, we will engage in an interactive session where we will explore some effective strategies to enhance pupils' reading fluency and comprehension. Mary has prepared some very interesting questions and, of course, content for you. So stay with us until the very end of this session to learn more. So, with no further delays, Mary, welcome. I would like to now give the floor to you. You can also share your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the very kind introduction there, Marlena, and welcome to all participants here today. I will share my screen now. Okay, can everybody see? Can you see?
We can see your screen, but we cannot see the presentation.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yes,
it works perfectly.
Thank you. Okay, so I will get started then. So the topic for today's presentation is a very important one for teachers. It's looking at reading fluency and reading comprehension, and some key insights and approaches for teachers to help all of our learners learn best that they can do. So what do we want to, I suppose, today to cover? I have several learning outcomes. The first one is hopefully to help you understand the relationship between reading fluency and comprehension. Hopefully you will acquire knowledge on struggling readers, so helping readers who find reading comprehension and reading fluency problematic. So what can one do as a teacher to help those learners? We will explore research-based strategies for teaching both reading fluency and comprehension. And finally, very importantly for teachers, is that you will leave with practical, classroom-ready approaches to help you help your learners. So, why reading fluency and comprehension matter. What is the importance? Why should we as teachers focus on developing these abilities and competencies for our learners? There is a connection to academic success and lifelong learning. So reading gives access to the wider world, to bodies of knowledge. Comprehension is a complex set of behaviors or cognitive processes. So reading comprehension is just not one single skill or competency. It is intertwined with many different other aspects of language and content knowledge. It is the interaction between the reader and the text. So very significantly is the reader. So there can be different readers will approach text reading in different ways. That is the individual uniqueness of the reader. The reader is reading to construct meaning between what is written in the text and what the reader already knows about the topic. So prior knowledge about the world, about ideas, will come into play for readers when they are trying to understand what an author is saying in a text. So a text reading is about meaning construction, but also about the active skills and knowledge that the learner brings with them to the reading task at hand. Comprehension needs to be taught within the context of the subject matter we want the reader to understand. So there's many different subjects, the sciences, the social sciences, history, geography, languages, whatever. They all have their own disciplinary norms, and we need to equip our learners with the skills how to access, to unlock the knowledge in these texts. And that is complex, that task, because of such diversity, inherent in many different subject disciplines. So what is fluency? Reading fluency. Reading fluency encompasses the automatic recognition of words, which allows readers to focus on comprehension rather than decoding individual words. So there's a lot of cognitive load, mental activity associated with decoding, so breaking down words to understand what they mean. So for learners who are fluent readers, they're freed up if they recognize the words, and fluency skills have been developed to enable them to understand and interact better with the task of reading at hand. When readers lack fluency, they struggle to recognize words quickly and spend unreasonably amounts of time decoding. And this is something that hinders them in their reading performance. So learners, struggling readers sometimes one of the tasks, I suppose, of the areas that they need extra supports with is developing reading fluency, which will free them up. If that skill is developed, it will free them up then to spend more time in understanding and creating meaning from the text they're reading. So fluency is definitely very connected to reading comprehension. They're not mutually exclusive. So what is reading fluency? Accuracy is something. Correct word recognition. So not guessing words, so that learners recognize words. Rate, appropriate reading speed. So if a learner or a reader is a hesitant reader, this impacts also the flow, the smoothness of the reading experience for the learner. Prosody, expressive, meaningful reading. So being able to read with expression, and of course writers, in particular areas in the literature, for example, and the arts-based would have, how you read something matters as well. So if a learner has challenges in this area, in their expressive language, how they read. That will also impact, I suppose, on the reading experience and also in their ability to interpret the text. Fluency supports reading comprehension. So really, as a teacher for reading comprehension, we can't exclude, the area of working on the fluency of our students when they're reading. So reading, fluent readers, what are they? What are the characteristics? What does it look like? They read with confidence, and confidence is a key aspect. It helps motivation, it develops a positive self-interest, and an idea that reading is also for me. It's not something I should avoid. Understanding what they read, it helps, because they're not stopping and starting, they're not stumbling over words, they're not guessing. So it helps, it frees up mental capacity there to focus on comprehending the message that's coming from whatever is being read. Reading fluency can enable a learner focus on meaning and not just decoding. Non-fluent readers, they struggle with decoding. They read word by word, so it can be stop and start, and they lose track of meaning. So there's an extra burden if our students are not fluent readers, if there's not dedicated time in instruction for fluency development, and if this doesn't happen in the early years, if these skills aren't acquired, then this can, impact on reading comprehension. Key insights about fluency supports comprehension. Repeated reading and modeling improves both fluency and comprehension. So the spending time, choosing a text, and to spend daily, even a short 10 minutes a day, reading and practicing reading for fluency is very worthwhile. Reading about, expressive language, how to be expressive, giving students opportunities themselves to read, not just being teacher-led, teacher-dominated, passing over the opportunities to read aloud, either, in small groups or individually, is very worthwhile time spent. So this helps students develop some awareness of structure. So developing language awareness, really, we're talking about here, understanding how language works, and language is about communication, and giving opportunities for our learners on a regular basis to develop reading fluency really helps understanding and meaning construction. So just I would welcome your thoughts on this question. If you'd like to share them in the chat. The question I'd like you to think about and maybe to share with us is, what one challenge do your students face with reading fluency? Is it about word recognition, speed with reading, or what is it? Looking at your own context, your own learners, what one challenge do your students face? So I would appreciate it if you could share in the chat some of your ideas there on this. So here what is coming through is word recognition. My students are challenged by word recognition and associated with sound, meaningful reading, lack of vocabulary, and mainly word recognition. Yes. So this is very interesting, I think. The vocabulary is a big area. So what can an intervention look like to develop reading fluency? And I have some ideas to share with you on the reading fluency. So they will come in a little while, but really ideas how to build vocabulary. So later on when I'll come and I'll share some practical ways of developing, but you are absolutely 100% correct in talking about the challenges of the word recognition. And also somebody, Maura, has written in that some students of hers, they read fluently, but they don't comprehend. So in those cases, those individual students, they can have issues, students with comprehending and reading fluently, or students, sometimes we need to diagnose maybe where their challenge could be very good on comprehension, but their challenges is fluency. So learners differ in the different challenges they face. That is one key aspect. So we look at reading comprehension and we looked at fluency. So we're talking about accurate recognition of words and smoothness in reading, reading with meaning, the flow, speed of reading. So we'll look now at what is reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is the ability to understand, remember, and make meaning from text. So a text communicates ideas, an idea, a concept, or many ideas. It involves vocabulary, background knowledge, and metacognitive skills. The ability there to think about higher, I suppose, inference skills, thinking about what is the message of this passage. What is the writer saying here? What is being shared, and the idea, what does that mean for what I already know about the subject matter? So this is something, so it's about really thinking, metacognition, being an active reader rather than being passive for reading comprehension. So to comprehend, somebody else cannot comprehend for anybody. Really, the individual has agency and needs to have the motivation and I suppose some strategic competence, some understanding of how to approach a subject matter to read, to understand. So reading is a multitask process, decoding plus meaning making. So these are really what is involved. And it's a complex set of cognitive processes, reading comprehension and fluency. Proficiency leads to increased motivation and curiosity, key really attributes for any learner, to be motivated and to be curious to know more. The more you learn about a topic, the more interested you are in learning because you feel comfortable with it. So this is important to remember as teachers, not to overextend our learners, to pitch what we're doing, or when we're choosing text to look at with our learners, our subject matter, that we consider where our learners are at, that we know our learners and we plan accordingly, because we want our learners to be motivated, to be interested, to be focused, to apply themselves. And so that is important, I suppose, to think about these aspects of developing the learner's confidence, enhancing their motivation, and enabling curiosity to kind of grow. These would be very useful things to think about when we are planning our instruction. Comprehension drives fluency. As students become more adept at monitoring their comprehension, like asking questions, what is the reader saying to here? Do I understand this idea? How does that relate to what I know already? You know, trying to fit in our understanding, build up a better understanding of the key idea. Learners read, you know, more fluently as they, I suppose, understand better. They're not stopping and starting. It's a much smoother process. With appropriate pace and expression, reinforcing both fluency and understanding. So comprehension, I suppose we could think, without understanding a word, it's very hard to make progress. If you're stumbling with basic understanding, if you're guessing, for example, words, trying to guess, you can't understand, you can't access it. This is where as teachers, we need to intervene. We need to monitor the progress of our learners, and we then need to plan an intervention. What can we do to help those learners? Comprehension improves in expression, pacing, and authenticity. So being automatic, this is the key, I suppose, characteristic of fluency, that after a while, learners, it becomes procedural knowledge, that they will read with ease. The more practice they get, opportunities to practice will lead to improvements and development of fluency. So a question for yourselves to think again, and I'd appreciate some of your thoughts if you could share them, please, in the chat. What do you find more challenging to teach? Fluency or comprehension? So what are your ideas on this? Fluency, do you find the challenge for your learners, or comprehension, or is that something that you haven't encountered? Comprehension, I see. Somebody else has said fluency. Comprehension again. So comprehension requires higher order cognitive processes, thinking what this means. It's an interaction. For comprehension, there's an interaction there between the reader and the text, the subject matter. Yes, so really predominantly the more challenging one that your learners encounter has came up as to being the comprehension. So how can we help our learners? Understanding reading through strategic processes. Reading fluency and comprehension involves a set of strategies rather than a single skill or formula. So it's complicated, but that doesn't mean that it can't be something that we focus on in our instruction with our learners. So there's many aspects to reading. So these strategies fall into three key categories: cognitive strategies, metacognitive strategies, and social interactive strategies. So I'll break each one down into a little bit what it's about. So, purpose, cognitive reading strategies. The purpose is activating your knowledge, an interplay between decoding and comprehension. So cognitive is thinking skills. So what you know already with what is presented. So some cognitive strategies you're probably familiar with would be brainstorming, asking students what they know about the topic. For example, how does this relate to what you already know? What are you thinking about? What experiences have you had that are related to this? So putting the question out there, trying to, setting the scene before you start reading, ascertaining where the students are at. You could also use, so this is the cognitive strategies, is getting the students to think with these questions, but you could also do concept maps. So visualization. So create a web of related terms and ideas to visualize, to categorize, to visualize some key ideas, maybe some prior knowledge that's useful to make the subject matter more accessible. Visual aids, show images, videos, or, recall certain maybe artifacts, whatever it is that's related to the topic, to build and to help the students make a connection. And we know, you might know some of the theories there. There's the schema theory, which is the idea that comprehension relates to connecting text to prior knowledge, so that we have in our brain already constructed knowledge, and we're adding something new when we're reading something perhaps and subject matter that students know nothing or less about. And after the reading task, the idea is that they will know more. An interactive model is the idea. Decoding and meaning making work together during reading. So the student being active, not being a passive. So this is very much about the teacher guiding the learners taking responsibility and gaining skills and confidence to be more independent. So that is something to think about. Metacognitive strategies. So purpose, learning how to learn. Self-awareness and self-regulation. So to give the student reader agency. So lifelong learning is the metacognitive strategies. It's not just about the prior knowledge, it's thinking about being faced with a task. How do I go about it? What can I do to improve here? Some examples of metacognitive strategies will always require action, so an active role of the learner. So self-questioning, monitoring comprehension, working independently and building their confidence. So that is something that we need to, I suppose, as teachers, explain to our learners what is involved, how to learn, how to develop reading fluency, what they can do, how to improve their reading comprehension. And finally, the social dimension of learning. So collaborative learning, working with others, dialogical reading, discussing, chatting with learners, with other fellow learners who are at the same level or near at the same level, as well as with the teacher. So peer discussions are very important here. Reciprocal teaching, and we talk about accessing something. If something is pitched at a level that's too far out of the reach, that's Vygotsky's theory, too far away from the learner to bridge the gap between where they're at and where they'd like to go, then that can cause challenges for learning. But with reciprocal teaching, where peers teach each other, they're generally at maybe a same level or near about. Sometimes that can be very effective, as a matter of fact, and it can break down barriers that might impinge, like might be go against a learner being honest about where they are, because they're not being judged maybe less with their peers and say by the teacher, so they can lose maybe less face. That all learners like to have, to protect their self-concept, their self-image. They want to be seen as competent. They don't want to be seen as struggling, weak, in a negative way. So sometimes working in a small setting with pair work or triad, three people, students working together rather than a whole class, can be very safe space as well, can allow you to chat, to experiment and improve at your own pace. And of course, literature circles, where groups work together, share their knowledge, can be very, you're building a community of practice there. And there's Vygotsky's theory about that, the zone of proximal development, not to pitch things at too high a level, know where your learners are at. So that would be something. Social interaction is very important. And for you as the teacher, scaffolding. So what can I do to make that task manageable for the learner? Can I pre-teach some vocabulary? Can I revise something? Can I give them extra time? Can I bring them into a specific program to when I identify certain gaps in their knowledge or certain areas they struggle with? So what can you do to help? Scaffolding for your learners would be important. So some ideas of, I suppose, fluency approaches you could use to develop this area for reading for your learners. You could do echo reading. Teachers make a sentence or a paragraph about something and students repeat it back. So this is for fluency drill, the getting the fluency going, getting smoothness, getting the pace going. So it is very good for, developing students, it models expressive reading, phrasing, tone, when to pause. It's a good one to do on a daily basis, not for an extended period, for a short 5-minute period, reading aloud. The teacher reads something, the students echo that. Many times with the younger learners, if you are teachers here from in the early years, is something, maybe it might be more something that's not done so often in a whole class situation with adolescents, but it could be done in a specialized program for learning support for certain readers, where there might be a smaller group, students might be brought one-to-one for support, or maybe into maybe 2 or 3 together for extra tuition to help them, those that are struggling with fluency. Paired reading is very effective. So the stronger and developing readers are paired. They alternate reading lines or take turns. That's very good as well. As I talked about with a peer that can break down some of the barriers that between a teacher and a student, peers helping each other. The more able reader helping the still developing reader. So this encourages peer modeling and cooperation, and fluency, is very good for fluency development. So that could be done weekly again. And readers' theatre, so acting out little scenarios to play playfulness around language. It builds really expressive language, the use, the throwing of the voice, giving meaning to what you're reading, and it can be a whole lot of fun because learners will thrive better if it's fun. If it's seen that's not something that is, boring or negative, if there's a little bit of creativity thrown in, that learners can experiment with what is presented and maybe reinterpret it in a different way. And of course, with theatre, generally it is a collaborative practice, and so that can be very nice. And there are a lot of resources on that, how to bring alive what you're reading, text, subject matter in different ways. So not just reading, looking at a text, but actually actively doing, working with somebody else in a social way, or maybe acting out in a larger group, are very useful ways for developing the fluency in a fun and meaningful manner. So the comprehension boosters. So there's a few you can stop and jot. So these ideas that you write down, you're reading something, you pause, you pick out something there, gather something out that maybe perhaps out of some subject matter, this text that is of interest to you, and stop and think for a moment. What is this saying? What do I know already about this? Or maybe open it up into the wider group, and then you share, the learners, they maybe take down a key word or two, a key idea, and maybe they have a choice on the matter. And that will help them with their thinking and understanding. Another very useful one is the think alouds. This is where the learners explain, what the text is saying to them, like that it's not silent. And this is very useful for assessment for the teacher, for formative assessment, so that you can, plan and see, and you can also maybe find out what is the challenge the learner specifically has with this subject matter, with this text. So there's lots, and then you can, of course, ones that the learners can, for example, be creative. They can make their own of what they can sketch out something. They can do a visual drawing of what this means. So it can be a lot of fun. They can change maybe where the story's going, or where they can add their own new knowledge. So that's something, again, that's meaningful. The learner isn't passive, but the learner has an active role. Fluency, comprehensive links. So fluent readers have more cognitive space for comprehension. So would be worthwhile to spend, as I'm talking, a bit of time on developing fluency. Struggling fluency, leads to mental overload, and that students can be disencouraged. They can become exhausted, mentally fatigued. They can switch off, lack concentration. So fluency is worthwhile to develop. So just a quick question. Think, one of your students who reads slowly, how does this affect their comprehension? Have you any experience of that? So can you think of a student whose reading fluency is a challenge, and how that impacts on the comprehension? Would you like to share? Has anyone any experience of that? I'm looking here in the text here. I've seen a very nice one here. A student, one of yourselves talks about, I read aloud, say for the students, stressing more difficult words, or I play another person's reading for them. I ask them for unfamiliar words which hindered their understanding of the text. I asked them a couple of questions orally for the whole class. I asked what they understood in general about the text. Then we look at the text with coloured pens on hand. I give them a set of questions to check understanding, and they find the answers in their text and underline accordingly. So here we see where the learners are very active. There's a variety of different approaches there. It's given variety. Somebody else has written down that the students may struggle with spellings. Absolutely. Like those students, for example, who have dyslexia, that the spellings is something that they have, the phonological awareness, their phonemic awareness, the ability to decode the sounds in words. That takes the extra mental capacity that they're not freed up actually to look at the meaning. They guess sometimes to move forward, and sometimes their inference skills mightn't be so good, depending on what prior experience they have of the world as well, and of the subject matter, and that can be challenges. For example, is a very good point. So the fluency comprehension link, it affects those who are worried about being too slow. This prevents them from understanding what they read, and that's so crucial. Students' self-concept is fundamental to their being, and they will have avoidance strategies to present themselves in a less able manner to their peers. So this is why equipping students with the metacognitive skills of understanding that learning to read and fluency and reading comprehension is lifelong. It's a lifelong, slow process, and it's something that will develop over time, but learners differ, and some learners may need more time to develop than others. And that's part of the process. It's complicated. So practical tools you can use, 1 minute, for example, reads, vocabulary building, some step-by-step maybe supports in the comprehension, sentence surgery, breaking down words like the language awareness, understanding like how sentences are formed, or if the sentences are too long, breaking them down into smaller segments would be useful. Giving students opportunities to pause, to think, not rushing instruction. So these are just some. Any one of these have you used or would you find useful? Oh, I see here somebody said, this is why I give more time to my students to read text. This is excellent. Yes, slowing down, spending more time. I want to read fluently because I want to decide what they are reading. So giving time to the fluency aspect, not just all about the comprehension, not neglecting fluency. So spending the time, doing the work on it will really make learning more enjoyable for your learners, the reading aspect of their learning. So there's tiered support. You might already know about that. So there's different levels of struggling readers. Those that would require maybe a specialized program. Many students with dyslexia might have a one-to-one program, or those that just are a little bit slower developing the different skills, and they would benefit from more a group, a social one that I talked about, the interactive, the social strategies. They do well and they thrive working with peers. So there's tiered support, and support that maybe at certain times might be more intensive on a more regular basis, and then sometimes the support can be reduced as the learners close the gap and they become better. Sometimes some school systems have language therapists. speech and language therapists who do the work with the phonological awareness, the segmenting, the breaking down of the components of sounds, the moving around of different sounds to show how different sounds can change meaning or give new meaning to words. So that's quite, that type of segmenting work, of phonological awareness training, that can be done in tiered support very effectively for different readers need different supports. Common challenges for students. There's many different challenges, I think. Limited vocabulary or oral language skills, and that can come from early childhood, that they might come from a family or an environment where there isn't as much access to variety of vocabulary and words and different types of text. So then this where the teacher comes in, bridging that gap, given access, spending time, and maybe the student is struggling because they don't have the prior knowledge or the prior experiences. So, these are important things to think about. Contextual learning, introducing vocabulary within the rich text and using real world context, connecting what's on the paper to the real world and asking the learners and trying to, showing the learners, let them think that what do I know already? What have I experienced maybe in the real world? Or how can I make a connection to what I'm reading so it will help me remember and understand better? Active engagement, encouraging students to use new vocabulary in their speaking and writing. That's again metacognition, learning how to learn. Being aware of the advantages of active engagement, reusing the words, becoming familiar with words. Interactive activities can be a lot of fun, using games, discussions, and creative tasks to encourage students to apply new words in meaningful ways. Personalization, so personalize the learning, adopting vocabulary lists and comprehension exercises to reflect the interests, cultures, and needs of individual students. Supporting diverse learners, English as additional language students, for example, visual aids would be useful, translated materials, sentence stems, so that they understand maybe the new language, how to like prefix, what they mean, or what, looking that language awareness component, building it in. Students with learning difficulties, multisensory instruction like universal design for learning, USDL approaches, decodable text like text, for example, shorter text, and maybe spending extra time building key skills, focus on certain aspects of a language for students to help them maybe if they have difficulty in certain areas. Gifted students, higher order questioning, independent research, not forgetting the diversity of our learners. Approaches to culturally responsive reading, diverse texts. We have learners who come from different cultures, and sometimes they feel that what they're reading does not be reflected in what they're expected to engage with within the classroom. Connecting text to students' backgrounds, valuing oral traditions and multilingualism. That's the language sensitive approach, that using prior knowledges of other languages or another language as a very valuable resource to help students access new material in a different language, so their first language or their home language. Language demands of text, like academic language, recognizing that, teaching your students about that, scaffolding vocabulary and syntax, and language awareness is a key component, I suppose, something that encompasses it all. Helping students be aware that language is a system and understand that a bit better. Assessing comprehension, really difficult to do. It is not easy to measure reading comprehension. You cannot reduce comprehension down to a single score because it's not a single thing. Comprehension should be tested within texts on the subject matter upon which the students have been provided with instruction. Integrating reading and content area goals. So really, you know, comprehension, why do we want to assess? We want to assess for new knowledge, for learning development, but having an assessment that's broad enough to recognize individual differences, knowing your learners, getting to know them, building their confidence, starting with what they know and building on that in our designing of our instruction and our engagement with our learners. And assessment feedback is essential, strength-based. So trying to find, I think, being kind in our feedback and our interaction with our students, finding areas that they're doing well with, and maybe just identify maybe one area of a priority that could be developed in a realistic way to improve. Strategy focus, not leaving our students with no idea about how I can improve, looking at where the challenge lies and saying, well, what can we do? What can I do as the instructor, as the teacher? What can I do within the group? What can the individual do? And student self-assessment, monitoring, letting, you know, students checking what they know, being able to ask for help, being confident enough, being able to understand, not maybe say this is not for me, actually to say, well, what do I have to know or do to be able to do this, to read fluently and to read for understanding, to comprehend. So how can we better support readers at all levels? I suppose, you know, is being aware of individual differences, not thinking in a single way, thinking in a multi-way, looking at what is known already, what I know as a teacher, getting to know your learner, developing a positive relationship with your learner, understanding learning is also effective, that is about emotions as well, about motivation, and they're hard to measure sometimes, but are also key ingredients. So thank you for your attention. For maybe later on when you have time, I have some recommendations for readings, and I hope that maybe perhaps some of them could be useful for you. So thank you so much for your attention, and any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Indeed, all the participants will be able to find the recording and the presentation as well on the webinar's webpage. We have shared it earlier in the chat, but I will share it shortly with you. You will be able to find all those references there, the strategies that Mary has analyzed during this session. And let me read some questions to you, Mary. So basically, in the very beginning of the webinar, we had a short debate. Let me read the comments to you. So one participant said that reading fluency, between which of those two, reading fluency and comprehension, meaning here, you think teachers should give more importance and more time in the classroom? And then we had another participant saying that for them comprehension is more important, but if students aren't fluent, it means probably that they don't get the whole sentence and the whole idea of each sentence and the whole text. What is your opinion, Mary? What would you say here?
Yes, well, the first question about fluency and comprehension, they're interconnected. As I explained, that fluency, if students are struggling with fluency, they're not free cognitively. Their mind isn't free to think about what is the text saying. If they don't recognize words, if they can't, if they're halting, if they're not being smooth in the reading, if it's a very stressful experience reading, especially if they're required to read aloud in front of the classmates, this can be embarrassing. Students can be so concerned about what their classmates are thinking or maybe judging them that they freeze, that they are so caught up with, you know, of being exposed almost their weakness in terms of fluency, that they don't give enough attention to comprehension. But also you can have, just to remember, struggling readers can struggle with fluency, And they can be very good as well with comprehension, especially those that perhaps have done pre-work, that have spent and have a lot of prior knowledge. But those also readers can be fluent, but they can experience difficulty with the comprehension parts, the understanding, the meaning making, because for some of the reasons they may not have the prior knowledge already. This might be an area that they missed previously, certain key aspects, and this can cause, challenges to them. So both are important, I think. As a teacher, I would recommend developing both fluency and reading comprehension. Fluency is essential, I suppose, for comprehension. You can't exclude them.
Maybe to wrap up to your ideas, I would say that maybe we can study, let's say, our classroom needs, our classroom's needs, for example. That would be a nice strategy, and see what our students need. I know in some cases, in some classrooms, teachers might have 20, 25, 30 pupils as well. So it might be a bit more difficult, but as a participant said earlier, you need to dedicate some time as well to understand your classroom's needs, and of course support them as much as possible. I think we still have some time. Before we close, can I address a few more questions to you, Mary, coming from our audience?
So, I'd be delighted.
We had one question regarding the strategies. The question was if reciprocal teaching could be students working in groups of 2, for example, small groups.
Yes, reciprocal teaching, yes, because sometimes working with a peer, just one peer can be very worthwhile, because it reduces, I suppose, the anxiety of how one appears in front of the bigger group. And also, as I talked about, a peer can give encouragement in that in that pair, that can be very empowering, because many times the barriers are in a learner's mind as well. They may think that reading isn't for me. I'm no good at reading. But if they're with a peer, and the peer could be encouraging, or it could be reciprocal, both could encourage each other, that would maybe help them and encourage them to spend extra time doing something. They might talk about something. They might have more of an opportunity in pair work to talk. Remember, learning is social. Talking about something helps you learn, helps you, maybe the peer might ask the partner a question. Oh, I didn't think about this before. Or they might make a suggestion. Do you remember we covered this? I think this could be related to this. And then perhaps they might ask the teacher what, as two, it might be sometimes some nervous learners. Some learners are anxious, and they get the confidence if they're working with somebody else. It's, to do it. And it's a very nice thing for a good classroom dynamic and a good relationship within a class, I think, to encourage pair work within a group of 2 in pairs. Very worthwhile.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe in bigger groups, some voices might get lost.
You're
it
right.
happens. Yes.
Yes, and some learners, they're more hesitant. They are not the first to answer. But if you're with a pair, if there's 2 people working together, well, you'll have to take turns in general. There's more opportunity to take turns, I should say. Than one, there'll be less opportunity maybe to just sit back and let others be active and be passive,
True, that's a truth, and we have seen it happening multiple times. And maybe we can address a couple of more questions. So, what about the students who dislike reading? We had this comment earlier in the chat. A teacher, she asked her students to read 7 pages, if I'm not mistaken, 5 pages of a book. Yeah. And out of so many students, only 7 respond to the activity. I don't know, would you like to share any tips?
Yes,
something.
I have some tips for that. I think to allow creativity to come on board, to allow the personal learner and say, well, this text, I appreciate that this text perhaps isn't your favorite text and you're not familiar with it. Maybe what it's talking about, the subject matter, is something that the learner hasn't really any prior experience of. But you could say, well, what could we do with this text to make it more relevant to you? Can you think about anything that this text is saying that is relevant for your interests or for what you already know? You could encourage them, you know, to use color, to use graphic organizers, to bring it alive in different ways, to allow the discursive aspect to come on board, to chat about this text. Because I know learning can't always be just, I suppose, we have curriculum. A curricula would have certain requirements for certain types of subject knowledge that all learners, that the population, the purpose of education is the population maybe would share certain knowledge. And sometimes the learners might be reluctant and might perceive, oh, this is something that I don't know anything about and I'm not that interested in it. But if you give opportunities, multiple ways to interact with the text, by acting, by games, by using visuals, by looking at little audio clips, by using apps, maybe some fun using technology to break down maybe the main ideas into something, maybe try and find out, being curious about what this text is saying and how we can relate to personally to the learners. It is challenging because there will be certain subject matter that has to be covered that's not maybe a favorite of the learners, but it's something that the national curriculum has decided it's of significant value and needs to be covered. Does that make any sense to your question there, what I'm saying? There's multiple, I suppose, ways of interacting with subject matter. So you have to kind of maybe sometimes trial and error and try new things. That's being a teacher, I think. As teachers, we have to be open to trying new things because learners are not all the same. They're very different. So we have to be almost detectives to find out how can I, and encouragers and motivators, how can I help my learners be more open and enthusiastic of what we are covering today in this lesson?
Yes, I believe what you mentioned about connecting the content, maybe the topics with personal experiences, things that students like, is also a very important part of their learning journeys, if I may say that. But as we wrap up, because we still have a couple of minutes, I would like, maybe you would also like to do this, to encourage people who attended this webinar to maybe think one small shift that you might make after this session, maybe in the following week, something that aligns with what we heard today, and basically something that speaks to your teaching styles. Sometimes I believe that the smallest change can make a very big difference. That's a very positive quote. I really like to say this. And before we close this session, we would like to remind you of some upcoming learning events on the European School Education platform. We would also like to remind you that when you're enrolling, this is very important. Some of you might have already enrolled for the webinar, for the upcoming webinar series. We would like to remind you that when you are enrolling for the webinar series on the EU Academy, we also ask you kindly to register for both webinars. In that way, our team will be able to cross-check your participation and, of course, award you with a certificate at the end. This only concerns the webinar series. And of course, don't forget that all our courses are available in a self-paced format after their conclusion. As you can see, this month's thematic is mostly focusing on reading fluency and comprehension. So we really hope that you find some interesting ideas, some strategies. And Mary, we would like to thank you so much for being here today with us. Thank you so much for this insightful and fruitful session. We will share the presentation and the recording with all the participants. You will be able to find it on the webinar's website. And I think that's it. We can conclude our session here. Thank you all for spending your Friday evening with us. We hope that you heard something interesting today and that you gain more confidence when tackling challenges regarding fluency and comprehension in your classrooms. Mary, thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.